for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. You are watching To The Point here on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Maroki. We're here all the way through until midday with a show full of all of today's big stories and those big discussion issues.
Yes, make sure you get in touch with your views, as usual, on our email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll be reading those out throughout the show. But first, it's time for the latest news with Rosie.
Thanks, Mercy. Let's get you up to date. MPs will hold an emergency debate on parliamentary standards later following accusations of corruption. Well, that's as the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, faces calls for a public inquiry into allegations of Tory sleaze. Last week, the government did a U-turn after a vote was passed to overhaul its misconduct system, blocking the suspension of Owen Paterson for breaching lobbying rules. UK travellers can now fly to the United States for the first time in nearly 2 years. The US has opened its borders to fully vaccinated visitors who must also take a COVID test within 3 days of arrival. Children need to be tested 3 to 5 days later. A British man killed in a shark attack off Western Australia has been described as a wonderful father. 57-year-old Paul Millerchip was swimming at Port Beach near Perth when the alarm was raised. During a search for his body, police only recovered a pair of goggles. Marks & Spencer have introduced pronoun-inclusive name badges for staff. The idea, which came from an employee, means that workers can now wear whichever combination of pronouns they choose. The supermarket chain says the initiative is a simple yet impactful way to make sure that LGBTQ+ identities are respected. You are up to date. I'll have more on those stories for you at 10 o'clock.
Good morning, you're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Maroki, and Patrick Christys. We've got a show full of today's big stories and lots of discussions on the issues you care about. So here's what's on the menu today.
Yes, well, the number of people seeking support for sexual assault has risen by more than 14%, with over 10,000 people still waiting for an appointment. We'll be talking to the head of Rape Crisis England and Wales about why numbers are rising.
Yes, and Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces a grilling in Parliament today over the handling of the Owen Paterson sleaze scandal. That's despite one minister dismissing the row as a storm in a teacup. So, should the Prime Minister apologise? Well, we'll be discussing this shortly.
We will indeed. Now, GPs could be barred from taking new jobs in affluent areas to force doctors to work in deprived towns, under plans being considered by the government. What might this mean for patients? Well, we'll be getting to the heart of the story.
Yes, we have all that coming up and much more across the programme for you as well. And remember to get in touch, as usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick gives his views on the threat of a winter lockdown.
There is no need for any more lockdowns because the NHS must learn to live with COVID. These aren't my words. These are the words of the NHS provider's chief, Chris Hobson. So why then are we in a situation where our health secretary is holding Christmas to ransom? Sajid Javid is using Christmas as a weapon in order to push the COVID booster jab, saying that you better all get it, otherwise, essentially, the celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ might not go ahead. Christmas is not the preserve of any government. It certainly shouldn't be used as a political football. But the football analogy is actually quite a good one, because the government keeps moving the goalposts on what it means to be fully vaccinated. A government insider confirmed yesterday that people wanting to travel, probably from within a few months' time, will have had their booster jab if they're eligible. So it means that fully vaccinated means 3 jabs now, not 2. And even proof of a negative test won't be enough to avoid travellers having to pay for their own quarantine and testing if they want to go abroad. This isn't me having a go at the vaccine. Loads of you will be sitting there right now thinking, this isn't a big deal, just take it. And yeah, that's fine, that's not what I'm talking about. But it confirms what I think we all already thought would happen, which is that we're going to be locked in a never-ending cycle of vaccinations, and that probably, from now on, elements of your personal freedom will depend on whether or not you've had the latest jab. But it also just seems to be going a bit further than that, doesn't it? Pfizer is now looking to get approval to vaccinate 12 to 15-year-olds. This is despite the JCVI recommending against it. A recent study in America showed that more children over there actually died of flu than COVID in the previous year. And given another study published last week showed that those who were double jabbed may be as likely to transmit the virus as those who haven't had the jab at all, it all does beg the question, why are we really doing this? Now, some will say it's because the vaccine does, mercifully, appear to reduce the severity of the virus and the chance of hospitalisation, and that's massive, of course. Others may point to the fact that we've seen a lot of Tory sleaze recently, and Big Pharma has been found to give groups of MPs and peers that campaign on health issues hundreds of thousands of pounds a year in hidden funding that could hand them undue influence. Just returning to the issue of Sajid Javid holding a religious festival to ransom, he's being backed up by vast swathes of the media who are tripping over themselves to report that COVID cases are surging, spiking and rising. Well, they're not. Saturday's figures show that the number of daily positive tests fell to 30,693, down almost 11% on the previous Saturday. Whether Javid actually means his Christmas threat or not, I don't think that's really the point. This government has presided over, and indeed caused, the biggest mental health crisis this nation has ever seen. There will be people across the country now, especially the elderly, who are clinging on to the hope that they will see their family this Christmas. And now there is this very hollow threat that it won't take place. Our government has repeatedly tried to scare us into submission, whether it's don't kill granny, videos of young people struggling with COVID to try and get uptake up amongst the teenagers, the Nepalese variant, which literally didn't exist, and now potentially cancelling Christmas. I just can't help but feel like these are bully boy tactics and gaslighting. And we didn't sign up for this, did we? Yeah, I just think I want to make it important. This is not some kind of anti-vaccine rant. It's more the tactics that the government are using, right? That's what I've got a massive problem with. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sad inevitability is that if the immunity wanes, then inevitably you will have to get a booster jab if you're to maintain the level of immunity the government wants you to have if you want to travel and do all sorts of things, which is sort of in the nature of I guess, the fact that immunity wanes. So I don't think that's escapable at all. I think it's for the government to say, to be honest, we will just have to accept that we're going to have to live with this because we can't, you know, have a two-tier society, can we, where people who don't have this booster jab are restricted from doing certain things, whereas people who do have the booster jab are. We can't surely live in a society where every single year, every single person in the population will have to have a booster jab.
Oh, I think we are.
Yeah, it looks like that's the way we're moving. And for me, I just don't think anything at all justifies another lockdown. I think some MPs are actually trying to make sure that Parliament would have a vote on whether, for example, we were to shut down schools. Again, Robert Halfon, the head of the Education Select Committee, I know that's something he's trying to drive forward. I just think the bar for shutting down the country again should be incredibly high when it comes to lockdown, and particularly when it comes to locking down schools. That is the assurance that I would really want to see from government.
Yeah, and I think, look, it shouldn't be a difficult case to make. At the end of the day, if tens of thousands of people every single day are testing positive for COVID and potentially 100 or whatever a day are dying from it, it should be a relatively easy case to make that you have to go and get your booster jabs and you have to keep on top of your vaccinations, etc., etc., etc. Although, of course, I also have made it pretty clear that, frankly, I don't think it's any of my business, personally, whether or not you do take your jab, but it's a personal choice. But actually, if you have to threaten Christmas and you have to, do all these things and make these kind of quite bold statements, really scare people into getting it, then something's going wrong there, isn't it? And I do think as well, we do have to have a look, and it's worth thinking about going forward. I know it's an issue that's not going to go away, is the grip, potentially, that Big Pharma does have, not just this government, but world governments in, and whether or not that's something that's worth having a look into going forward, I think.
Yes, indeed, and get in touch with your views, GBviews at GBNews. I'm sure this is something many of our viewers have an opinion on, given that it's something that you might have to actually be doing yourselves, taking a booster jab very soon. I think we can go to a couple of views now. We
can indeed, yes. A range of views. We've had Martin get in touch saying, what the heck is going on in this country? He didn't quite phrase it like that, but there we go, Martin, thank you. The government have extended the powers to shut us down. This is from Michelle. They awarded themselves that power without a vote. There's nothing anyone can do. But then Alan's got in touch and said, the COVID, this virus is killing 100+ people a day on average. Older people are scared to go out. So it is killing people. And basically he says that, essentially we should be doing exactly what the government said, basically. He doesn't have a problem.
Yeah, well, keep your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But for now, after the break, we'll be talking to the head of Rape Crisis England and Wales, as demand for its services has risen by 14%, they say, in the last 12 months. Stay with us for that.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, Rape Crisis England and Wales say the demand for its services across 39 centres has increased by 14% in the last 12 months, rising to around 75,000 people, while waiting lists also reached record highs of 10,000 people wanting to speak with counsellors and therapists, double the number from 4 years ago.
The report, Holding It Together, said rape crisis centres provided more than 1 million sessions of specialist support, including counselling, in the last 12 months, an increase of 41% on the previous year.
Yes, well, now let's talk in more detail about this with the CEO of Rape Crisis England and Wales, Jane Butler, who joins us now. Thank you for joining us this morning to talk about this. Firstly, a particularly concerning aspect of this report is the number of victims and survivors on waiting lists for mental health assistance. Talk to us more about this and what can be done to support people who've gone through this.
Yeah, we've seen a lot more people come forward as a result of the last year or so, probably for a range of reasons. I think lockdown exacerbated lots of mental health for all of us, didn't it? And many people found it hard. And I think that if you are someone who's experienced trauma, then that's even worse. And we've also got the increased impact of bereavement, of job losses and other things during the pandemic that have impacted that. So we've seen more and more people come forward for support from rape crisis centres, and we've had to find different ways to support them when face-to-face provision that we've traditionally relied upon hasn't always been possible because of COVID conditions. So a lot more has been done to kind of support those people and to give more time to them when they've needed it.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's presumably been exacerbated a lot by the fact that a lot of people who were living in very desperate situations anyway were then essentially trapped behind closed doors with their abuser for a very long time, weren't they? And are we seeing a backlog of those cases now?
To some extent, yes, I think we are. It's possibly easier for people to come forward to access counselling now because they might not have felt that it was possible for them to get that during the pandemic. I know lots of us felt like we couldn't access services. Our doors were open, at least virtually, but we've definitely seen more people come forward during this time. And also, yeah, people are finding that their lives are changing again. Perhaps children are back in school, which makes it more possible to attend counselling sessions. So that's had an impact as well, of course.
What's the demographic of the people that you're seeing come forward, and has that changed during the pandemic?
I don't think that's changed hugely. We see lots of different people from different walks of life who've had different experiences. We still see a huge volume of people who have experienced sexual assault and sexual abuse and sexual violence previously. So it doesn't necessarily have to be recent reasons that they come forward. It could be that they've had time to process what's happened to them and feel now ready to access therapeutic support, and that's why they're coming forward now. So we still see high volumes of people coming from who are dealing with the trauma of what's happened to them either a few weeks ago or a few days ago or many years ago potentially.
Is it maybe a reflection on recent times as well? We've seen some very high-profile cases, the Sarah Everard case, for example, being probably the major one recently anyway. That, I think, can lead, can't it, to potentially some more people coming forward. But I'm quite keen to get your views on the fact that, I mean, the actual convictions for rape in this country are astonishingly low. I mean, they're less than they're less than 2%, I think. I wrote the figures out last week. Does that put people off coming forward, do you think?
Yeah, the rape charges are about 1 in 70 at the moment. So 1 in 70 of reported rapes are brought to charge. And we know that rape's really underreported. So those numbers don't even reflect necessarily the number of people who've experienced rape or sexual violence and who don't report it. Our services are not necessarily linked to coming forward to report. So you can still access our services whether you choose to report or not. And actually some of our services will help support somebody in making that report and in supporting them through the court process if they want to. That wouldn't be counselling services, that would be what we call ISFA services. But that support is available for somebody who wants to go through the criminal justice process. And certainly we hear from people who come to us that that's part of the difficulty in deciding whether to report or not. They're worried about being believed by the police. They're worried about all the different reasons why those cases aren't going to charge, about the real kind of issues that exist within the criminal justice system, not just in dealing with the investigations when people go to report the sexual violence that's happened to them, but also in how long it's taking to complete those investigations and how long it's taking to get to court. We've seen backlogs in the criminal court for years and definitely exacerbated but not caused by the lockdowns.
Wow, Jane, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Jane Butler of Rape Crisis England.
Yeah, devastating situation, that, isn't it? And it's just something that's certainly not going to go away anytime soon. I do find it, there is a flip side to all of this stuff, isn't there? Which is that it's all very well and good pumping money into these kind of services, but actually maybe, and look, I don't say this lightly, maybe it is worth doing more to educate men, actually, because then actually that could be a way of nipping this thing in the bud, as opposed to making sure that we get the prosecutions, making sure that support is there for the victims, which of course we need to do. Another way of trying to nip this crisis in the bud would be to stop it from happening at all, wouldn't it? But anyway.
I think social media has a massive, it's a whole another debate that we could go into, but, porn, TikTok, lots of social media companies and lots of generally media companies across the internet are very much, it's very accessible, all of this stuff, to particularly very young people. There's not often safeguards and things to stop people from accessing what some might say is wholeheartedly inappropriate material and content for young people. So I think they also have a big role to play.
Yes, indeed. Well, just moving away now, family and friends have been paying tribute online after at least 8 people, including a 14-year-old, were killed and dozens injured at a Travis Scott festival in Texas. A warning, there are some flashing images next. The rapper says he's absolutely devastated following the stampede at the Astro World Music Festival in Houston on Friday. Scott and the organisers of the event have been sued by an injured concert goer who branded it a predictable and preventable tragedy.
Yes, at least 2 investigations, one of them criminal, are underway, and here's what he had to say.
My fans really mean the world to me, and I always just really want to leave them with a positive experience. And anytime I can make out, anything that's going on, I stop the show and, help them get the help they need, I could just never imagine the severity of the situation.
Yeah, really tragic there, and we're actually going to be speaking a bit later on to an expert in crowd management, just to talk a little, because we've had our own disasters as well, haven't we, in this country, not least Hillsborough. So it's going to talk to us a bit about what you can do if you ever find yourself in this situation, what you can advise people to do who are going to concerts and other events like this. So stay tuned for that as well.
Yes.
But now, another story on our agenda today, Marks and Spencer's has started giving its staff pronoun badges as part of a diversity and inclusion initiative. The brand's food PR manager shared a photo of his badge in a LinkedIn post where he said they have already helped some start having very necessary conversations around gender identity. There's his badge there. You can see it says his name, David, and then underneath that it says he, him, and his. So that's his pronouns that he wants to be.
Well, that's just as well, because when I was going to ask him where the carrots were, and without that, I would have got lost. I'd have ended up in the frozen food aisle, presumably, causing massive offence to everyone there.
And it's obviously, it's obviously quite self-evident that he is a he, his, and him. But then that's the conversation we have. That is the conversation we have, and we'll get into it a little bit more later. But the new tag...
I've been identifying as a journalist for many years now, and some people would question that.
You've been getting away with that.
Yeah.
The new tags can now include the person's name, their chosen pronouns, which can include, as we showed there, he, him, his, she, hers, she, hers. It's hard to say.
You choke on it, don't you?
And they, them, theirs. So some people, non-binary people, like to be referred to as they. So instead of he or her, you say they did this. So you're not allowed to basically say his or hers when you're referring to them. And Marks and Spencer said the move is a result of staff asking for the option to include gender pronouns on their name tags. So this is something I'll be doing my monologue on a bit later, and we'll get into a discussion about whether you should be forced, I don't know if forced is the right word, strongly encouraged to use somebody's pronouns, especially because it stretches beyond he, him, and hers and his, and sometimes you have these sort of made-up ones, which are she and z and all sorts. So that's what we're going to be talking about a bit later. So get in touch with your thoughts on that and anything else.
Yes, indeed. It's it's a funny situation, that really. I mean, look, I suppose ultimately, do I actually really care? Well, not massively, because it doesn't really affect me whether or not someone has he or him on their name badge. I mean, when I go into M&S, I'm more desperate to find out what's in the hot food aisle than what I am on.
But I think that, of course, that in and of itself doesn't change much. But it's this idea of what happens when you don't call that person and you reported for a hate crime, or you're accused of being transphobic or whatever. It's sort of the wider debate around it, I feel.
Yes, indeed. Well, a quick delve into my inbox then, ladies and gents. GBViews at gbnews.uk. I said ladies and gents, I suppose, given like what we're just talking, whatever you identify as. But lockdown is a term used in prisons. This is the government want to cancel Christmas to show you who's boss. That's from Simeo. That's bold, Simeo. But there's quite a lot of these issues. The last time I looked, I was and am a free person. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I won't be taking any vaccines as it's my choice, and that's from Hillary. But then how would you feel, Hillary, I suppose? Hey, of course it's your choice, but, the government might say to you, well, hang on a minute, you can never go abroad again now. You're going to need three times a charm these days. But anyway, some views there.
Yes, well, that's it for this hour. We'll be bringing you much more across the next 2 hours. But first, let's give you the weather.
Yes, well, this is where I've become a meteorologist. I'm identifying now as a meteorologist. Looking ahead to today's weather, after a chilly start in the east, it will turn cloudier. Meanwhile, there's some rain for the west. And let's take a look at the details, shall we? For southwest England, we're looking at a predominantly dry picture this lunchtime, but there will be a lot of cloud in the sky, temperatures between 12 and 14 Celsius. And after the cold start across the southeast, there'll still be some sunshine around at lunchtime, but this will be turning hazier from the west. A lot of cloud over much of Wales, this producing some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle, especially over the hills. It will be largely dry if you're stepping out at lunchtime across the Midlands, and for a few of us there should be a bit of brightness as well. Temperatures up to 13 degrees Celsius in Shropshire. The cloud will also be streaming in from the west across Yorkshire and North East England, gradually erasing the morning sunshine. Temperatures typically around 10 degrees, so probably feeling a little bit on the chilly side. Some heavy rain and strong winds making its way to western Scotland, but at this stage it should be dry. If generally cloudy for Edinburgh and other eastern areas. They've not been frazzled to death by global warming yet then, but anyway. Much of the morning's rain should have cleared from all but the easternmost parts of Northern Ireland, but it will at the very least feel very mild if you're out and about this lunchtime. Rain will affect northern and some western areas, with any clear spells becoming confined to East Anglia. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point right here on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Muroki. And we are here all the way through until midday with a show full of all the biggest stories and loads of big chatting topics.
Yes, so get in touch with us on our email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, there on the screen, and we'll read out your views throughout the show. But first, let's give you the latest news with Rosie.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 10 o'clock. MPs will hold an emergency debate on parliamentary standards later, following accusations of corruption. Well, that's as the Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces calls for a public inquiry into allegations of Tory sleaze. Last week, the government made a U-turn after a vote was passed to overhaul its misconduct system, blocking the suspension of Owen Paterson for breaching lobbying rules. The Shadow Child Poverty Secretary, Wes Streeting, told GB News a public inquiry and an official apology are needed.
I think we need an inquiry about how that contract was awarded, because it seems there was no tender process, no competition. So I think we need to know that it was above board and that taxpayers' money was well spent. He needs to call off the attack dogs who've been sent out to attack the House of Commons Standards Commissioner, and make it clear that the Standards Commissioner will have the full backing of the government to pursue MPs without fear or favour, to make sure we're upholding basic standards of decency in public life. And it's about time Boris Johnson himself apologised, because at the end of the day, the fish rots from the head, and these kinds of grubby standards are the standards set by Boris Johnson in Number 10, and it's just not acceptable.
Police in Northern Ireland are appealing for witnesses after a man was shot at his home in Antrim. He was taken to hospital after being hit in the chest. Meanwhile, a bus has been hijacked on a loyalist estate outside Belfast. 4 masked men boarded the double-decker bus and ordered the driver and passengers off before setting it alight. Last week, another bus was hijacked and burnt down in County Down in an apparent protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol. UK travellers can now fly to the United States for the first time in nearly 2 years. The US has opened its borders to fully vaccinated visitors who must also take a COVID test within 3 days of arrival. Children need to be tested 3 to 5 days later. Airlines are now increasing their schedules to meet growing demand. Aviation Minister Robert Courts says this is a momentous occasion for people and a significant boost to the aviation sector.
It's a massive moment for the aviation sector as we look to build back better from the terrible blow that the coronavirus pandemic has laid to us. So it's about people fundamentally. It's about getting families back together. It's about making sure that when you haven't seen friends for years that you're able to go out and do that. And that's particularly important with Thanksgiving and with Christmas coming up.
A British man killed in a shark attack off Western Australia has been described as a wonderful father. 57-year-old Paul Millerchip was swimming at Port Beach near Perth when the alarm was raised. During a search for his body, police recovered a pair of goggles. His wife, who doesn't want to be named, said he died doing what he loved.
Rest in peace, Paul. He died what he enjoyed doing the most, which was exercising. He was a wonderful man, a wonderful father, and he loved his exercise.
Twitter users will be expecting Elon Musk to make good his promise to sell 10% of his Tesla shares following an online poll. 3.5 million people voted. 58% said he should dispose of the stock worth around £16 billion to pay tax bills. He'd said he'd abide by the results whichever way they went. Marks & Spencer have introduced pronoun-inclusive name badges for staff. The idea came from an employee, and it means that workers can now wear whichever combination of pronouns they choose. The supermarket chain says the initiative is a simple yet impactful way to make sure LGBTQ+ identities are respected. You are right up to date here on GB News. I have the latest headlines for you at past. Right now it's back to the point.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. You're watching To The Point here on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Muroki, and it's going to be an action-packed hour for you coming up on the show today with all those topics that you care about to get you talking.
Yes, and we'll start with Prime Minister Boris Johnson facing a grilling in Parliament later today amid the continuing lobbying scandal and the resignation of former Tory MP Owen Paterson. The government's been heavily criticised for its handling of this scandal, and we'll be bringing you the very latest.
And the government's levelling up agenda has turned its sights to healthcare finally. GPs will reportedly be banned from taking new jobs in affluent areas and redirected instead towards deprived towns in an attempt to remedy the health inequality across the country.
Yes, and after the tragedy at a concert hosted by rapper Travis Scott in Texas, which saw at least 8 people lose their lives, we'll be talking to a specialist about what it takes to manage a crowd, what can go wrong and what you should do if you ever find yourself in the middle of a crush.
Yes, we have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. And of course, as usual, you can get in touch with us, GBViews at gbnews.uk. But first, Mercy gives her views on having to state your pronouns at work.
Marks and Spencer's has become the latest British institution to succumb to the pressures of the gender identity lobby by giving pronoun badges to their staff members so that members of the public know how to address them properly. We're all, of course, familiar with the pronouns he, him, she, her, but a whole new host of pronouns have emerged in recent years, created by people who don't wish to be referred to as either male or female, who identify as gender neutral. These include Z, G, Zim, C, and so on and so forth. It's not exactly clear what the penalty is for not learning these new pronouns, presumably being labelled transphobic and being reported to the police for committing a hate crime. But Marks and Spencer's is no pioneer in this respect. Companies the country over are encouraging staff to adopt gender-neutral language and to refer to people by the pronouns of their choice. Even our very own Ministry of Defence, the supposed headquarters of British military might, which spent, by the way, nearly £40 billion of taxpayers' money over the last year, has jumped onto the bandwagon. Just a couple of days ago, it was revealed that the Ministry of Defence officials have been told to state their preferred pronouns in meetings and have been issued with inclusive language guidance which warns against the use of the word female. That's in case it's offensive to gender non-conforming people or the trans community. My position is this: people can refer to themselves as whatever they please. If people want to personally identify as non-binary or gender fluid, it's perfectly right that they should be allowed to do so. If people want to personally identify as men when they're born women or vice versa, again, that's a personal matter for them. But that's exactly what it is, a personal matter, not a matter to be enforced on everyone else. If I'm ever told to state my pronouns in the beginning of a work meeting or forced to use a whole range of alien alternative words I know full well make no grammatical sense and that I'm supposedly not allowed to question, I will have to kindly decline, thank you. I'm simply not doing it. Not because I'm transphobic, I'm neither scared of nor hateful of transgender people, and not because I don't recognise gender-neutral people are human beings with civil rights. Of course I do. I just don't recognise the ideological framework which forces people to believe in the supremacy of gender identity over biological fact. And I certainly don't recognise the legitimacy of any ideological framework that seeks to police my use of language. The prolific Professor Jordan Peterson, clinical psychologist, professor of psychology and philosopher, put it succinctly when a hate campaign was launched against him for refusing to be forced into using gender-neutral language at his university. He said this: "I've studied authoritarianism for a very long time, for 40 years, and it starts by people attempting to control the ideological and linguistic territory. There's no way I'm going to use words made up by people who are doing that, not a chance." That's what he said. And I'd be inclined to agree. If others want to state their pronouns, I respect their right to do so. And they too should respect my right to uphold my own framework of beliefs.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the views have been flying in already on this. In fact, they were when we just mentioned it in the hour before as well. And lots of people saying this: I won't be shopping at M&S anymore. And yes, they've added that as well as John Lewis to retailers. This is Ian. M&S now added to John Lewis as retailers where I will no longer shop as a result of their woke agendas. Why are we allowing ourselves to be driven by this?
Yeah, it's, I mean, so there's a grey, all of this whole debate is full of grey areas, and it's a bit complicated to talk about because, yes, on one hand, I do completely accept and, you know, acknowledge that people want to identify as gender neutral. They don't want to be referred to as he or him. And that's fine. We live in a civil society. I like living in a civil society, and so they should be allowed to do that. But on the other hand, it's, and I know family members that this has happened to, where they're in meetings and everybody at the beginning of every meeting is asked to go round and state their pronouns. So you introduce yourself, you know, hi, I'm Mercy Maroki, and my pronouns are she and her. That's how you do it. And it's all a bit very sinister that people are, there's almost no choice in the matter, because who wants to be the only person in the meeting who says, actually, I think this is all a bit ridiculous and I don't really want to do it. You know, people are kind of forced into doing it. And what I'm saying is, my issue isn't with the fact people personally want to do it. Fine. But if then where we get to as a society is people being demonised or people being called transphobic, or people being reported for hate crimes for saying, actually, I actually think biological sex takes supremacy over whatever gender identity you happen to want to have, then that's a problem. It's where it all leads to. That's the issue for me.
Yeah, well, I can understand that completely. How many staff do M&S employ, and what percentage of staff have requested pronouns on their badges? I'm guessing not that many, and that's from Elizabeth. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Elizabeth, really, which is that there does seem to be a lot of pandering to a very small minority of people. Now, whilst I absolutely would want all of those people to feel comfortable and certainly not face any discrimination whatsoever, if every single other person has to make a concession or to do something in order to appease those people, well, what about the things that annoy me in society? Does everyone have to bow down to me now? Gosh, that's a wonderful note.
Yeah, but this is... I know where this is all going to lead to. It's going to lead to certain people who are, on the face of it, might appear to be a man or a woman and who've asked to be called by different pronouns, and then you'll have customers approaching them saying, excuse me, sir, or whatever, and then they'll just get into an argument over the fact that, somebody's, calling them the wrong pronouns. That's where it's going to lead up to. I mean, what's the point? It's just all a bit divisive and a bit pointless, if you ask me.
Indeed. We'll keep those views flooding in. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, despite U-turning on his potential plan to overhaul parliamentary standards procedures, Prime Minister Boris Johnson will face an outraged House of Commons today, not for the first time, as they hold an emergency debate over the corruption scandal engulfing the government.
Yes, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has called on the Prime Minister to answer, apologise and act after a succession of Tory MPs sought to excuse the Prime Minister's attempts at corrupting British politics. The leader of the opposition accused the Prime Minister of creating one rule for himself and his friends and another for everyone else. He says the Prime Minister must apologise to the country and take action to undo the damage she's done.
Well, earlier on the Great British Breakfast, Labour MP and Shadow Secretary of State for Child Poverty, Wes Streeting, gave Labour's reaction to ministerial misconduct in the House of Commons.
For a start, Boris Johnson needs to understand why people are so angry. You can't have a situation where one of his own MPs is paid £100,000 a year to lobby for a private company. I mean, that's been banned in the House of Commons for centuries. And yet, Boris Johnson's reaction to it wasn't to discipline his MPs or to back the Standards Commissioner and the recommendations, but to try and scrap the entire disciplinary process in the House of Commons. I mean, it's just outrageous. It really is. And let's remember that there are significant amounts of public money at the Prime Minister's disposal, at the disposal of his ministers. In fact, in the case of this company that Owen Paterson was lobbying for, they've had hundreds of millions of pounds worth of taxpayers' money. So in terms of action, I think we need an inquiry about how that contract was awarded, because it seems there was no tender process, no competition. So I think we need to know that it was above board and that taxpayers' money was well spent. He needs to call off the attack dogs who've been sent out to attack the House of Commons Standards Commissioner and make it clear that the Standards Commissioner will have the full backing of the government to pursue MPs without fear or favour, to make sure we're upholding basic standards of decency in public life. And it's about time Boris Johnson himself apologised, because at the end of the day, the fish rots from the head. And these kinds of grubby standards are the standards set by Boris Johnson in number 10, and it's just not acceptable. The important thing is how we act, how we respond when MPs are found to be wrongdoing. We've got a case in point right now. Claudia Webb, who was elected as a Labour MP at the last election, has been found guilty of a very serious criminal offence. The moment the charges were brought, the Labour Party suspended her. The moment the prosecution succeeded, and she was successfully tried, she was expelled from the Labour Party, and we're making it clear that she should resign from the House of Commons. If she doesn't do the right thing, we'd support a recall petition. We'll go door to door in Leicester to get her voters to recall her, because we don't think people like that should be in Parliament. So we've all got a responsibility to uphold standards here, whether it's our party or not. And I think you look at the contrast in leadership. Keir Starmer taking one of his own MPs to task when she's found to be wrongdoing, Boris Johnson trying to scrap the whole system that holds us to account. Keir Starmer's someone who actually put MP expenses cheap behind bars when he was Director of Public Prosecution. Boris Johnson seems to turn a blind eye to wrongdoing in his government. And look, that's the choice facing the country now about the kind of leadership you want in number 10. And I don't think Boris Johnson is upholding the basic standards in public life that all of us are meant to adhere to. What really worries me is not just that Boris Johnson didn't accept the report and tried to scrap the whole standard system. What really worries me is how many Conservative MPs were prepared to go along with him, including, I have to say, a lot of colleagues who I've had genuine respect for across the party divide. And I think they've got to have a serious look at themselves in the mirror as well, because we as MPs, it's up to us to hold the government to account. It's up to us to uphold the rules, to uphold basic standards of decency in public life. And the moment you lose sight of that and just troop through a voting lobby because you've been told to, or, you know, you start going along with these kind of sleazy scandals because it happens to be one of your mates, the whole system falls apart.
Yeah, West Streeting there seeming to conflate the idea that threatening to throw acid over someone is the same as having a job on the side, and also seeming to ignore the fact that Diane Abbott, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell actually vouched for Claudia Webb in court. So, bit of a difference. But anyway, let's speak to Adam Cherry now, a reporter at the political blog Guido Fawkes. Adam, what's your take on this? How much trouble is Boris Johnson actually in?
Well, I think the fact that we're still talking about it would suggest that it's going to stick around for a little while longer. I think when this first broke last week, there was at least some speculation that maybe this will blow over by the weekend. It's still on the front pages, so it's not gone away yet. And I think given that there's a debate on it later today, we might still see this might have some legs for some time yet.
This worthy of all this hoo-ha basically, because some are saying actually this is the tip of the iceberg and there's a wider problem of political corruption. Of course, Labour would say this is in the Tory party, but many are saying just generally in politics. And I noticed that Anne-Marie Trevelyan, the International Trade Secretary, has been doing the media rounds this morning, and she says, I don't consider there a need to be an inquiry. There is no wider problem. What's your take on that?
Lobbying isn't within the exclusive purview of the Tory party. I mean, if you look at Labour's own front benches, there are lobbyists there as well, and it's not as if an inquiry would turn over a few bad eggs on just one side. It is a problem across the House, and as you were saying earlier, political corruption and sleaze. Even looking at Claudia Webb, who on the same day that Owen Paterson announced that he was resigning, was found guilty. So it's not as if this is exclusive to one party. We'll have to keep an eye on this for quite some time, I think.
I mean, there also seems to be rather gratuitous calls for Jacob Rees-Mogg to go. It's not just the Prime Minister. I mean, is this just posturing really for the Labour Party? Like I said before, it's all very well and good them using the example there of, well, look at the way we responded to Claudia Webb. But I mean, what she did was actively criminal, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what Claudia Webb did was far more significant than what Owen Paterson did, of course. But the calls for Mogg to go, I think, are a little bit premature. Yeah, he stood in front of the House and instructed them to go for this. But let's not forget that this really came from the top. This came from Downing Street, and it came from the Chief Whip. So the suggestion that Mogg should go, I think I would be very surprised if that happens. And as far as Webb is concerned, yeah, a far more significant crime. And it's shocking to me that she hasn't resigned already. The fact that she is still there speaks to a serious rot within the Labour side. Of course, she's no longer a Labour MP; she's independent. But it's worth bearing in mind that this isn't a small problem for just the Tories.
And finally, what is this being reflected at all, do you think? I mean, maybe it might be too soon to tell, but in terms of what voters are saying and the support they give to the Conservative Party, because they have been ahead, irrespective of all of this, they have been ahead of Labour for a very long time.
Yeah, well, polls go up and down. Last week would have been a shock for them because they were within touching distance, Labour within touching distance for the first time in quite a long time. But I would be surprised if you asked a person on the street who Owen Paterson was, what the situation was, what the details of this case were. So we journalists like to talk about cut through. This story obviously is still on the front pages, but I'm not certain. I don't think this is going to sink the government. I don't think this is going to hand Keir Starmer an easy victory or anything like that. But it has certainly shaken Downing Street. We're still talking about it at the very least. So we'll see how it goes, but it's not necessarily the smoking gun.
No, absolutely. And also, if he did hand Keir Starmer an easy victory, he'd probably drop it, wouldn't he? But anyway, Adam, thank you very much. Adam Cherry there, reporter at political blog Guido Fawkes running you through this. And I do wonder as well, it's all very well and good calling for things like Boris Johnson to go. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to whitewash this situation. This is an absolute mess, and it is sleazy, and it is a bit wrong, and certainly it looks pretty grubby. But at the same time, if Boris goes, then we have to have a Conservative leadership election, then we have a general election. Does anyone really want that for this? I don't know. GBnews at gbnews.uk.
Exactly, and let us know. We asked him there, Adam, whether it's cutting through to voters. Let us know what you think. Maybe you voted Conservative for the first time in 2019. What do you think of all of this? Does it actually affect your likelihood of granting them another vote again? And also, I suspect many people will be looking at the Conservatives saying, OK, they're not great at all, but what is the alternative? Is it Labour under Keir Starmer and what some would consider his inadequate front bench? I mean, it's almost, the opposition is hardly something to contend with, is it? So.
Yes, well, there we go. Yes, in fact, some would say it's not an opposition. But anyway, let's delve into the terrifying world of my inbox. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Get rid of the government, forget Labour, forget the Conservatives. They just all need to go. We need people with common sense to represent the people. That's from Christina, who's taking, in a way, quite an anarchic view to things there. But there we are.
Scrap the concept of a government.
Scrap the lot. Yeah, so there we go. Tory sleaze, 2 words, Tony Blair. All of them are rotten to the core. That's from Jerry. I don't think that'll be a particularly unpopular view, that, Jerry. And PM must apologise. There you go. There we go. Alison's been in touch. I don't really care about MPs with their heads in the trough. That's it. What's new? I really care about the government getting on with the business of running the country and putting measures in for our country to thrive. So thank you, Alison.
And I suspect most people want the government to just get ahead and do that, don't they? Keep your views coming in. GBviews at gbnews.uk. But after the break, GPs are set to be banned from rich areas and forced to work in poor towns under new government plans they're currently considering. We'll be talking about why this could be coming into place and what this would mean for you. But first, the weather.
Hi there. A lot of cloud for many of us through the rest of today, with outbreaks of rain into the north and the west. Drier elsewhere, with still some sunshine ahead of the main weather front, which is moving into northwestern areas. This low pressure pushing towards Iceland, so far enough away from the UK, but its trailing weather fronts are bringing some outbreaks of rain to mainly northwestern, but some western parts of the UK as well. So that's where we've got the thickening cloud, turning damp across parts of Wales into the southwest as well. The more persistent rain, therefore, northwest England, western Scotland, clearing up for Northern Ireland. Ahead of the rain, actually some sunshine there for the East Midlands into East Anglia and the southeast. A little bit milder in many places compared to Sunday, 12 to 13 or 14 Celsius. Into the evening, and strengthening winds push further outbreaks of rain into the western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Trailing cloud and some small outbreaks of rain elsewhere, but generally a cloudy picture overnight, and with that breeze, it's going to be a milder night with temperatures holding up well above zero. We're looking at 8 to 12 Celsius by and large as we start off Tuesday. But a damp start there for southern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, northwest England. The rain turns up then into parts of Wales as we head into the late morning period. But it does clear Scotland and Northern Ireland, replaced by sunny spells and scattered showers along with a blustery breeze. Ahead of the rain, again, a largely fine day across East Anglia in the southeast. Even milder once more, 15 to 16 Celsius possible, but feeling a bit cooler there for Scotland and Northern Ireland as those blustery showers arrive. And they'll continue into Tuesday evening as well as Wednesday, with a lot of cloud further south on Wednesday and further outbreaks of rain at times. The rain not particularly heavy or persistent. It's mainly just a damp day on Thursday in places in the south. Sunny for most of us on Thursday before further rain on Friday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, nearly 100,000 protesters took to the streets of Glasgow on Saturday to march for climate justice. The procession, which began in Kelvingrove Park and ended in Glasgow Green, is considered one of the largest protests in Glaswegian memory. Police have praised the majority of marchers as being good-natured. However, 22 arrests were made. And here to give his recap of the weekend's event and a preview of what's to come is our Scotland reporter, Davy Donaldson.
Yeah, we've had a whole host of protests across Glasgow. It started with the Pilgrims procession. That was where people from Extinction Rebellion, some of them would walk to the city, met up with others to walk through Glasgow city centre to get their point across. It then turned on to the Red Rebel train on Monday, which I was at Glasgow Central train station. They came off the train, they'd met up with others from southwest of England and come up on the train and came off, and I have to say that was a very beautiful protest, a quiet, silent protest, which a lot of people at Central Station were kind of looking and wondering what it was all about. But in terms of colour, it was absolutely beautiful, and people could see exactly why they were trying to get their message across and doing it in a different way, perhaps from shouting and banging drums, etc. So that was certainly a very good one. On the Wednesday, we had the Greenwash protest. That was excellent as well. I was also at that one. That was at Buchanan Galleries. And certainly very different. We saw birds, people complaining about the climate effect that climate change is having on birds and things like that. We also heard some songs. We had all sorts there, really, banners, and again the Red Rebel train people also turned up to that one as well. That was certainly a good protest. However, when it left the city centre, went up Sauchiehall Street, they ended up obviously being put into, was it Renfield Street and St Vincent Street. So that's where they managed to get to that area, and police surrounding them and some say kettling them and not allowing them out for basic things like the toilet and to get water. Certainly a lot of people very, very unhappy about that, but obviously finally they did manage to get out. Friday we had, on Friday we had the Fridays for Future March, which left Kelvingrove Park. Again, I was at that one. That again was peaceful. I think they were expecting more numbers, probably somewhere in the region of 10 to 15,000 at that one. It was slow to get off, but it did eventually get away around about 12:30 and make its way down to George Square, which was of course the end goal. Got down to George Square, there's a number of speakers there. The GMB were involved in that one as well, so a lot of other people trying to get their views across on the back of the protests from what we've seen from the activists. So yeah, certainly plenty to do. And then of course they had the big one, which obviously again left Kelvingrove Park. That one it took even later to get going, but we were talking thousands of people here. I don't think there was that many maybe at Kelvingrove Park in terms of maybe 50,000, but as the day went on, as the numbers picked up, despite the weather, you have to say, because Glasgow was not a good city to be in on that day, and a lot of people you think may have stayed at home due to torrential rain and cold, but no, they came out in force, they came out in their numbers and descended on George Square, and it was from George Square they met up with more people and then ended up in Glasgow Green, where there was anywhere between 50 to 100,000 people there making their point. I heard from speakers from Argentina, from Canada, from America, from South America. So really a lot of people trying to get the point across there. I mean, in terms of protests that are going to happen this week, I mean, I don't think there's too much. Certainly we won't see the scale of what we've seen before, so I'll just run through some of these. We've got Glasgow include the Loss and Damage, Africa Drillers, Northern Killers and Armadillo Die, and that's in the Necropolis, so we're watching out for that one. But I think the scale of protests, we're not going to see the sheer amount of people that we saw in Glasgow on Saturday and on Friday as well. Obviously there will be people still staying on and hanging about, but certainly the number of people at these protests and attending these protests will certainly dwindle as we progress throughout the week.
Yes, David Donaldson there whizzing us through some of the more cultural elements, I think it's fair to say, of what went on over the weekend. Anyway, GPs are set to be banned from rich areas and forced to work in poorer towns under new government plans. A former senior official put forward the scheme to improve the health in more deprived areas of England. According to a study carried out on the Social Market Foundation, poorer areas of the UK have almost half the number of doctors compared to richer places. Now, I'm actually going to be discussing this in my monologue very, very shortly, well, in the next half an hour or so, to try and get stuck into this issue.
Yeah, I suppose it's part of the government's plan maybe to level up. We know they're trying to do that. We've asked, we keep saying, what does level up mean exactly? Maybe this is one of their ways to level up health, because there are lots of health inequalities. But something tells me it's there's obviously going to be more GPs per head. In wealthier places, because population density, I would assume, maybe, I don't know.
Well, this is the issue, isn't it, as well? And as we'll talk about, when you are in, by and large, a more deprived area, there does tend to be a higher population. There does also tend to be higher levels of immigration. That helps the population grow and increase and increase and increase. And also on top of that, if you are in a deprived area, the general standard of health tends to drop. And so, as a result, these are the areas that are most in need of GP practices. They're also probably the areas where a GP would, if you're in it for the money anyway, would least like to work.
Yeah, so. Indeed. So keep your views coming into us, GB Views at gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to those very shortly. But after the break, following the tragic deaths of 8 concert goers in Texas, we'll be talking about how crowds can be safely managed and what you should do if you ever find yourself in the middle of a crowd surge. But before that, let's look at the morning's news with Rosie.
Thanks, Mercy. Let's get you up to date. MPs are going to hold an emergency debate on parliamentary standards later, following accusations of corruption. Well, that's as the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, faces calls for a public inquiry into allegations of Tory sleaze. Last week, the government did a U-turn after a vote was passed to overhaul its misconduct system, blocking the suspension of Owen Paterson for breaching lobbying rules. A policeman has been stabbed in the French city of Cannes. The Interior Minister says the officer escaped injury protected by his bulletproof vest. The suspect was seriously injured when a policeman opened fire as he allegedly tried to attack a second officer. Local media have been describing the suspect as an Algerian who holds an Italian residency permit. A British man killed in a shark attack off Western Australia has been described as a wonderful father. 57-year-old Paul Millerchip was swimming at Port Beach near Perth when the alarm was raised. During a search for his body, police only recovered a pair of goggles. UK travellers can now fly to the United States for the first time in nearly 2 years. The US has opened its borders to fully vaccinated visitors who must also take a COVID test within 3 days of arrival. Children need to be tested 3 to 5 days later. An Amy Winehouse dress has sold for more than £180,000 at auction. That's 16 times the original estimate. The halter neck was worn during her final stage performance a month before her death at the age of 27. More than £3 million was raised from the sale of over 800 items, including handwritten notes and accessories. You're up to date. I'll have more on all of today's main stories for you at 11 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, family and friends have been paying tribute online after at least 8 people, including a 14-year-old, were killed and dozens injured at a Travis Scott festival in Texas. A warning, there are some flashing images in this next video. The rapper, Travis Scott, says he's absolutely devastated following the stampede at his Astroworld music festival that he hosts in Houston on Friday. Scott and the organisers of the event have been sued by an injured concert goer who branded it a predictable and preventable tragedy.
Well, at least 2 investigations, one of them criminal, are now underway.
My fans really mean the world to me, and I always just really want to leave them with a positive experience. And anytime I can make out, anything that's going on, I stop the show and, help them get the help they need, I could just never imagine the severity of the situation.
Well, now let's speak to Steve Allen, who's lead crowd safety consultant at Crowd Safety, which is a UK-based consultancy that are consulted by major event organisers worldwide, and was actually head of safety and crowd safety for Oasis from the mid-90s through to their last ever performance, my favourite ever band, so there we go. Look, thank you very much for joining us. Look, first and foremost, have you ever actually had to stop a show because of safety concerns like these?
Oh, yeah. We stopped some 25, 30 shows in our time, and the bands that we were representing, were very much for that as well. If there was any life safety situation that, was a threat to life, then they would go along with it fully, and everyone agreed with it. The thing is, people get caught up with this phrase "show stop." It's a temporary halt to the performance for a life-threatening situation.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not cancelling the show there and then. You have an immediate response to what is deemed to be life-threatening. That could be a crowd collapse, but crowds collapse at concerts every day. If it's a prolonged collapse, and you're looking at the crowd in distress, which can only be identified by people with sound experience and judgment.
And how did these things develop? Because obviously we're used to going to concerts, there are the sort of seats round the edge and then the central area where there's a standing crowd. From your experience, how do crushes and surges actually start? What happens that leads to this?
Look, there's a number of contributing factors that can cause a surge or a crush, as you put it. The fact is that we're made up of over 50%, 60% water. If there's an attraction, when the main artist always goes on stage, there's always a surge forward. Always, we compress, we move forward, we want to be nearer to the actual epicenter of it. But similarly, if there's a panic in the crowd, if someone shouts gun or gunman, particularly after the situation in Vegas, events after that, tragedy, then people will panic and they'll move forward. Any rumor, but normally it's because the artist has gone on stage or a particularly lively song or focus of that concert, which is causing that crowd to compress. you also understand the psychology of the particular demographics that are attending that event. And that would have been carried out in advance of the event and a risk assessment put together to determine exactly what type of crowd profile they were going to achieve. There's also barriers that are put in place and configured to limit the amount of surge and limit the amount of risk, if you like. But no matter what, this still needs to be monitored throughout the event. All the plans are good, but when an emergency situation happens, this must be monitored, using competent people, so that if there are situations, that they can be identified in the embryonic phases, monitored, and an instant show stop called.
So what should people actually do if they find themselves in a crush? Because I think, let's be honest, it can seem like a very helpless situation, can't it?
Look, my experience of doing events, live events, 30 years, if anyone tells you that if you're in the middle of a crowd surge or a crush, all you've got to do is keep your eyes open and lift your arms, they've got no experience, in my opinion. If you're caught up in a crowd surge or a crowd crush, you're limited on what you can do, virtually nothing. You're relying on the people that are there managing the show, monitoring that show to call, the situation. You're not going to be able to do anything. I've done countless research over many decades on people caught in crushes, and this is guys that are ex-US Marines, 6'4", built, 250 pounds, strong as an ox. They couldn't move their arms and were lifted off the ground. So for anyone to suggest that these are the things we do, we keep our eyes open and we look around and we listen, utter nonsense. If you're caught up in it, you're reliant on management of that event, show stop team, monitoring that crowd to actually call it straight away. And we involve house lights. So the front of house lighting designer would be involved in the show stop. The minute it's initiated, the artist is fully aware, fully briefed what the situation is. House lights, white light comes up across the crowd, which focuses the video sensors of us. The audio sensors are kicked in because the band stops performing. All noise is killed, apart from the communication from the performer, giving instructions to the crowd via a third party. And if I may say that, the performers are there to perform. Yes, arguably we've all got a duty of care and responsibility. They're there to put the performance on. They're reliant on everyone else, the management, the promoters, everyone else to ensure that the crowd is being managed safely. And if there's an issue, every single artist that I dealt with were very compliant. They don't want anything to happen to their audience. I can guarantee you that. And my thoughts and prayers go out to everyone that's been affected by this. And I can assure you that the crew, the artists, everyone associated with that particular event will not forget this for the rest of their life.
Absolutely, and we've dealt with some very necessary but some very serious stuff there. I really appreciate your expertise on this particular issue, Steve. But just moving away, just to finish on a potentially slightly lighter note, I suppose. What was it actually like working with the Gallagher brothers? Because everyone seems to have a different story, or at least a few stories to tell about the Oasis lot.
Fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. It was of all the bands that we toured with. Some things are best kept, but no, it was a wonderful experience. Everyone involved with it, you actually knew you were with something of a phenomenon. And every time we did a show, you could feel that in the crowd. The energy from their audience was on a complete different level, and hence the show stop procedure was pioneered with that band. In the late 90s, I developed it, spoke to Noel Gallagher, and I said, look, you've got a very high energetic crowd here and there's a high risk of a situation happening. This is what we want to have in place. They were fully supportive behind it, and we stopped the shows on numerous occasions, but they knew we wouldn't stop it for a petty reason. Someone spilt their drink. That's not going to happen. The crowd's collapsing, going down, and they're not getting back up, well, there's a vertical crushing or a structural collapse. They entrust the likes of us to actually ensure that that's going to be managed properly. And an example of this is the World Cup in Qatar. We've been appointed by a lead risk management company down there called Matterhorn a year ago. So the planning for that has already started for the fan zone areas, with the view of crowd management and the show stop procedures in place for those areas. So they're taking it seriously, and these are the measures that are in place nowadays at major events, and you've got to have it. An example I gave to another press agency earlier this morning was when we fly on a jumbo jet or an A380, there's 500 or 600 people on that, and yet the person responsible for the safety of everyone is a pilot with umpteen years of experience if something goes wrong. The same should be, relevant to an event. You've got people there that are coming to be entertained, have a good few drinks, do whatever else they do at events, relax. But if something goes wrong, they need competent people that can identify that in the embryonic phases and call it straight away. So the immediate action drills are put in place and people go home safely.
Steve Allen there, lead crowd safety consultant at Crowd Safety, which is a UK-based consultancy. They do major events worldwide, and of course, they were bang involved with Oasis back in the day, weren't they?
Yeah. Not very encouraging to hear there's next to nothing you can do. But clearly there just needs to be better safety protocols in place. And I believe this isn't the first time Travis Scott has actually been in trouble.
No, it's not.
Arrested by the police before for, encouraging riots at his concerts before, and for people have got hurt at his concerts in the past. So maybe something for him to reflect on as well as other artists who do similar things.
Indeed, indeed. Well, we've got a few views coming in, GB views at gbnews.uk. Thank you very much, everybody who's been getting in touch. Lots of response to the preferred pronouns issue that we have. So if you're just joining us, Marks and Spencer's now want their staff to put pronouns on their badges, just in case anyone, I don't know, accidentally misgenders someone on the way to the frozen peas aisle or something like that. But if we're now allowed to wear badges which presumably compel you to address them in a way that may not feel right to you, then surely this is a bad thing. That's from Neil, who basically just thinks, well, why bother?
Yeah, and that was my point, really. It's about compelling people to do something they know is just generally, they believe is incorrect, or uncomfortable with doing.
Yeah, Philip has said he objects to be called male or him. He wants to be known as Bond.
Wow,
So,
why not?
Why not?
I don't see what argument I can give you for that not being the case, given we can identify as anything we want.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, lots of people as well banging on about the climate change crisis. I mean, there was a few videos there, weren't there, doing the rounds of people just doing quite fruity stuff, really. I mean, if that doesn't change the world, then what? Then nothing will. Nothing will. Look, hey, we've only pledged to end deforestation pretty much immediately. We're all going to be paying through the nose for net zero. But I tell you what, when that woman dressed as a crow stood up and started guffawing in the middle of Glasgow's High Street, that really hammered it home to Xi Jinping, didn't it? Anyway, right, loads of people have been getting in touch on all of that. GB views at gbnews.uk. But we're moving away now, aren't we?
Yes, actually, to quite a serious story, pandemic-related. Official figures have revealed that there could be a worrying number of people with undiagnosed dementia since the start of the pandemic. It's been reported that the number of assessments by GPs have fallen by a third, and this comes amid growing public concern over access to face-to-face appointments with GPs.
Yes, the analysis of NHS statistics revealed that the number undergoing checks in memory clinics has more than halved. So experts say the figures are shocking and show that the most vulnerable have been left to live in uncertainty and fear. Well, Dr. Lawrence Buckman is with us now. Thank you very much for joining us. This is just yet another, kind of addition to the waiting list. I mean, how devastating can this be? What's the actual reality of the situation now? If someone is there thinking that they've got dementia, how long are they waiting before they can maybe get an analysis done?
Well, they're waiting until they can get a GP to see them, and then, if they think it's appropriate, refer them onwards. This is not something you can do remotely. You actually have to see the patient in the room and listen to them and examine them. And this takes a while. And then you have to refer them. And memory clinics, of course, have been wrecked by COVID. Now they're up and running again, but the waiting list is sadly and predictably long. And of course, there are going to be people out there in the community who, some of them fear they have dementia and don't have it and can be reassured fairly quickly by the GP. But there are others who maybe are less fearful, but actually do have dementia and really do need to be seen in a memory clinic after assessment by a GP.
So what does the government and the Health and Social Care Secretary and the NHS generally, what needs to be done to ensure that people are being seen as soon as possible, given the fact that the reality is we do have these massive backlogs and there are still massive pressures on the NHS?
Well, there are not enough doctors and other people, particularly experts in psychological analysis in memory clinics. There are just not enough of these people there to deliver to the number of patients who quite reasonably need to be seen and need to be assessed. And you can't create those people out of nowhere. So the backlog is partly COVID-induced, but now it's related to the lack of workforce in the community and in hospital who need to be in position. There isn't a simple fix-it to this, and money is not the answer.
Right, so money's not the answer then, and this is something that I've been banging on about quite a lot, because there is already quite a lot of money swirling about, isn't there? So what is the answer then? What's the actual categorical way? How do we sort this? Let's fix it right here now, live on GB News.
Oh, I wish it was that easy. If I was Mr. Fix-It, I would be recruiting as rapidly as possible, first more GPs and more clinical support staff in general practice to process these kind of patients. And it requires a particular kind of expertise, which is rarely present in the community and should be. We also need those people in hospital, and we need to train them. So we need training schemes now, recognising there will be a delay, and we need to get some of those clinical psychologists, that takes 3 or 4 years for a start, to get them in position so they can support dementia clinics and reduce the waiting list. This is going to take time, but throwing money at it is not going to make it any easier, because it takes years to grow these kind of people.
I'm going to be talking about shortly, actually, in my monologue, which is about whether or not GPs should be essentially banned from going and moving out to deprived areas, or moving into, initially anyway, your more affluent areas, just as an element of levelling up. I know it's slightly away from the dementia side of it, but I suppose it's all relevant, isn't it? How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the plans, potentially anyway, to, I suppose in a way, make GPs work in more deprived areas to try and level that up?
Well, since I warned the Blair government that closing down the committee that controlled where doctors worked would be a mistake and would ultimately result in inequalities, I can hardly be surprised when exactly what I and many others in the profession predicted would happen has happened. It should never have been, and recreating the Medical Practices Committee, which was not a popular organisation, but was essential to make sure GPs were in places where GPs needed to be.
Right.
There's no forcing. They were not forced, but the legislation to make that happen and bring that committee back would not be difficult and would quite quickly improve the situation.
Yes, now I can understand why a GP might want to work in Kensington over Keighley. I can understand the logic behind that, but I want your expert opinion on this, because I've got my views. Is there now potentially a little bit of an inclination for GPs to go into it for the money and not necessarily because they care deeply about the well-being of the people of Keighley or Kirby or somewhere like that?
Well, it's a well-travelled trope, but I'm afraid it's not true. If you wanted to be rich, you wouldn't start by being a GP. There are other things you can do with a medical degree that will earn you a lot more money. People go to places because they like working there, and it has always been popular for people to work in what would seem to be more deprived places as well as less deprived places. But of course, people like to practice in nice areas. And the Medical Practices Committee and structures like that were designed to encourage people to go to areas that were less popular. And it did a brilliant job for over 50 years before it was abolished. And bringing it back would get people to work in the right places. Money doesn't attract people to work in certain places. It's the presence of good housing and good schools, and also a conviction that you want to help those people. Lots of doctors go to work in places that might appear to be unpopular because they want to work with those populations. They don't do it because they're dumped there or for the income difference, which actually is very, very small. You often can afford housing much more in areas that are slightly less popular. So I think the finances don't stack up as the reason why people do these things. It's because they're perceived as harder places to work, not poorer places to work, harder. And I'm not sure that was ever true. And I think smoothing out the population of doctors across the population of patients would actually be very good and would be part of the levelling up agenda. And in my view, should never have been crushed in the first place.
Well, fantastic. You've made your view heard loud and clear, Dr. Lawrence Buckman. Thank you for your time this morning, GP and psychotherapist there.
Yes, well, yes, fascinating stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, I suppose what he says there about, well, the poorer areas, you'd actually be able to have perhaps a better standard of living with the salary you'd have, because house prices and things like that would be lower. The cost of living would be lower.
Yeah, some people, well, Christina's got in touch here with one option, I suppose. We need a few private psychiatrists and doctors doing pro bono work to help the NHS get back on its feet. I know a lot of lawyers do a lot of pro bono work. Maybe that's a solution. It's interesting. We're identifying problems. We're coming up with solutions here on GB Views at GBNews.uk. You love to see it. Yeah, and a lot of you getting in touch about that, basically just saying that, well, someone here was actually quite a bad story about how they noticed recently that one of their friends had dementia. You know, I won't name you, obviously, and that you urge them to go and get it sorted, and basically it's going to be an uphill battle essentially for them. Of course it is, and it's very sad. Hopefully it sorts itself out soon.
Yes, well, keep your views coming in, GBViews at gbnews.uk, and we'll be reading those out across the next hour of the show. But for now, we'll give you the weather, and we'll be back after that with today's stories.
Hi there. A lot of cloud for many of us through the rest of today, with outbreaks of rain into the north and the west. Drier elsewhere, with still some sunshine ahead of the main weather front, which is moving into northwestern areas. This low pressure pushing towards Iceland, so far enough away from the UK, but its trailing weather fronts are bringing some outbreaks of rain to mainly northwestern, but some western parts of the UK as well. So that's where we've got the thickening cloud, turning damp across parts of Wales into the southwest as well. The more persistent rain, therefore, northwest England, western Scotland, clearing up for Northern Ireland. Ahead of the rain, actually some sunshine there for the East Midlands into East Anglia and the southeast. A little bit milder in many places compared to Sunday, 12 to 13 or 14 Celsius. Into the evening, and strengthening winds push further outbreaks of rain into the western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Trailing cloud and some small outbreaks of rain elsewhere, but generally a cloudy picture overnight, and with that breeze, it's going to be a milder night with temperatures holding up well above zero. We're looking at 8 to 12 Celsius by and large as we start off Tuesday. But a damp start there for southern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, northwest England. The rain turns up then into parts of Wales as we head into the late morning period. But it does clear Scotland and Northern Ireland, replaced by sunny spells and scattered showers along with a blustery breeze. Ahead of the rain, again, a largely fine day across East Anglia in the southeast. Even milder once more, 15 to 16 Celsius possible, but feeling a bit cooler there for Scotland and Northern Ireland as those blustery showers arrive. And they'll continue into Tuesday evening as well as Wednesday, with a lot of cloud further south on Wednesday and further outbreaks of rain at times. The rain not particularly heavy or persistent. It's mainly just a damp day on Thursday in places in the south. Sunny for most of us on Thursday before further rain on Friday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, everyone. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Muroki, and we're here all the way through until midday with a big show full of today's biggest topics and biggest guests.
Yes, and we want to hear what you think about all the issues we've been talking about, or all the issues we're going to be talking about over the next hour as well. So make sure you keep your views coming in at gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll get to those very shortly. But first, it's time for the latest news with Rosie.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 11 o'clock. MPs will hold an emergency debate today on parliamentary standards following accusations of corruption. Well, it's as the Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces calls for a public inquiry into allegations of Tory sleaze. Last week, the government made a U-turn after a vote was passed to overhaul its misconduct system, blocking the suspension of Owen Paterson for breaching lobbying rules. The Shadow Child Poverty Secretary, Wes Streeting, told GB News a public inquiry and an official apology are needed.
I think we need an inquiry about how that contract was awarded, because it seems there was no tender process, no competition. So I think we need to know that it was above board and that taxpayers' money was well spent. He needs to call off the attack dogs who've been sent out to attack the House of Commons Standards Commissioner, and make it clear that the Standards Commissioner will have the full backing of the government to pursue MPs without fear or favour, to make sure we're upholding basic standards of decency in public life. And it's about time Boris Johnson himself apologised, because at the end of the day, the fish rots from the head. And these kinds of grubby standards are the standards set by Boris Johnson in Number 10, and it's just not acceptable.
A policeman has been stabbed in the French city of Cannes. The Interior Minister says the officer escaped injury, protected by his bulletproof vest. The suspect was seriously injured when another policeman opened fire as he allegedly tried to attack a second officer. Local media have described the suspect as an Algerian who holds Italian residency permit. He reportedly said he was acting in the name of the Prophet. Police in Northern Ireland are appealing for witnesses after a man was shot in his home in Antrim. He was taken to hospital after being hit in the chest. Meanwhile, a bus has been hijacked on a loyalist estate outside of Belfast. 4 masked men boarded the double-decker and ordered the driver and passengers off before setting it alight. Last week, another bus was hijacked and burned in County Down in an apparent protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol. UK travellers can now fly to the United States for the first time in nearly 2 years. The US has opened its borders to fully vaccinated visitors who must also take a COVID test within 3 days of arrival. Children need to be tested 3 to 5 days later. Airlines are now increasing their schedules to meet growing demand. Aviation Minister Robert Court says this is a momentous occasion for people and a significant boost to the aviation sector.
This is a massive moment for the aviation sector as we look to build back better from the terrible blow that the coronavirus pandemic has laid to us. So it's about people fundamentally. It's about getting families back together. It's about making sure that when you haven't seen friends for years that you're able to go out and do that. And that's particularly important with Thanksgiving and with Christmas coming up.
A British man killed in a shark attack off Western Australia has been described as a wonderful father. 57-year-old Paul Millerchip was swimming near Port Beach near Perth when the alarm was raised. During a search for his body, police recovered a pair of goggles. His wife, who doesn't want to be named, said he died doing what he loved.
Rest in peace, Paul. He died what he enjoyed doing the most, which was exercising. He was a wonderful man, wonderful father, and he loved his exercise.
Marks & Spencer have introduced pronoun-inclusive name badges for staff. The idea came from an employee, and it means that workers can now wear whichever combination of pronouns they choose. The supermarket chain says the initiative is a simple yet impactful way to make sure LGBTQ+ identities are respected. A dress worn by Amy Winehouse has sold for more than £180,000 at auction. That's 16 times the original estimate. The halter neck was worn by the singer during her final stage performance, a month before her death at the age of 27. More than £3 million was raised from over the sale of over 800 items, including clothing, handwritten notes and accessories. You are up to date. I'll be back at past to keep you up to date.
Good morning. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's. We've got an hour full of all of today's big stories and lots of discussions on the issues you're talking about at home. So here's what's on for the next hour.
Yes, well, the government has been heavily criticised for its handling of the Owen Paterson lobbying row. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, will face a grilling in Parliament later. We'll bring you the latest on this unravelling scandal.
Yes, and the Metropolitan Police has revealed plans to deploy plainclothes officers outside and around nightclubs in a bid to better protect women. This comes as the force continues to face heavy public and political criticism regarding the conduct of serving officers. But will this really make women feel safer in nightclubs? We'll discuss.
We will indeed. And the University of Oxford and universities in London have been benefiting from donations from a trust set up by the late Max Mosley. Critics have said that the money comes directly from the inheritance left by Max Mosley's father, Oswald Mosley, the leader of the British Union of Fascists, and is therefore tainted money. Stay with us for a discussion on that controversial issue.
Yes, we have all of that coming up and more across the programme. And you can get in touch as usual on our email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick gives his views on levelling up healthcare.
We hear a lot about levelling up, don't we? But maybe, just maybe, we're actually going to start seeing it. GPs are set to be barred from choosing to practice in rich areas and could be forced to work in poorer towns under new government plans. It comes after a former senior official put forward the scheme to improve the health in more deprived areas of England. Geographically, we're a relatively small nation and we spend a shed load of cash every single year on health and social care. I find it disgraceful, then, that we have a situation that if you live in Westminster, men have an average life expectancy of 85, and if you're a woman, you can expect to hit 87. Kensington and Chelsea, 83 for men, 87 for women. And then in Liverpool and Manchester, men are expected to live to just 76, and women to 80. And don't get me started on Glasgow, for goodness sake. General practices in deprived areas are being disproportionately affected by, quote, a mounting cycle of pressures driven by workforce shortages and higher patient volumes. This is according to the Health Foundation. It's a fact that GPs in deprived areas see between 15 and 10% more patients. It doesn't take a genius to work out that in more deprived parts of the UK, there is higher population density, and these areas also tend to see higher levels of immigration, so therefore higher population growth as well. And typically, people in deprived areas are more likely to suffer from more health conditions, so it creates this quite literal death spiral of poor healthcare. Now, I can completely understand why a GP would rather work in Kensington than Keighley, but that's not really the point of the job. The main part of the job is providing healthcare to people, and if GPs need to be forced to work in more deprived areas, then so be it. And it emerged over the weekend that the proposed GP strike appears to be closer than ever. Dr Richard Vautray, chair of the British Medical Association's General Practitioners Committee, has essentially been forced out of office. Reports suggest that the BMA has now been captured by a group of just 12 militant medics, essentially a cabal of medically trained trots who care more about trying to bring down the government than caring for their patients. It appears that they've decided to go to war with the government over plans to make GP practices more accountable for the amount of face-to-face appointments they deliver. But in any war, there are casualties, and in this case, the casualties are you, me, and our loved ones. I think it's important to say that there's a misconception there's some kind of slur campaign against all GPs. That's not the case. But there is huge levels of patient dissatisfaction. One anonymous GP in the Telegraph over the weekend told of stories of patients coming to him privately after being misdiagnosed, only to find out that they're going to die now. One lady was told her cough was a virus. It turns out she has cancer deposits in her ribs and she won't see Christmas. We hear a lot about the mental health crisis among the public. I wonder if there's a mental health crisis in the British Medical Association and among some GPs, and whether or not they need therapy, whether or not they need a complete cognitive shift, they need a re-education. The main motivation for going into medicine should be to save lives, especially in the most deprived areas, not to make as much money as possible with as little accountability as possible. Yes, well, anyway, if they need a nudge in the right direction and that direction happens to be somewhere on the outskirts of Birmingham, then I'm fine for them to do it.
Yeah, I think this is a long-running, I wouldn't say dispute, but slight disagreement between you and I think you're more critical of GPs' intentions than I probably am. I do think genuinely that the majority of people who do go into the profession, the vast majority, overwhelming majority, negligible amounts, I think, are going into it for the money. I mean, who wants to put themselves through 7 years of medical school, umpteen years of actually sort of rising up the ranks from a junior doctor and onwards, just for the salary they get, which is not a huge salary given their expertise, partly because it is funded, of course, by the taxpayers.
Well, I think that's the thing where there's a discrepancy here, because I could understand that if their main motivation was to spend their entire life working in the NHS. But I think at the first opportunity, most of them start doing a couple of days a week in the NHS and the rest privately, and then you can escalate and escalate and escalate. Before you know it, you're on mega bucks.
Yeah, and that's a problem with the system as a whole. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to... That's because they get offered more to be locum doctors, and then the NHS falls into the trap of sort of rehiring their own doctors, but having to pay more for them. So that is the problem with the system in general. And I would never criticise somebody who, GPs have families too. They need to maintain their livelihoods as well. Never criticise somebody for taking the opportunity to get a better paid job elsewhere. But I think fundamentally this is a really good idea. I mean, we spoke to a doctor earlier on, Dr. Lawrence, and he told us that this is something he's been advocating. I mean, since the Blair years, he thought it was a bad idea to scrap this sort of committee which planned where GPs should be going to work. And I don't think there's a good justification for necessarily objecting to the idea that where there are poorer areas, where there are higher levels of sort of health problems, and that is where the focus should be in terms of healthcare provision. I think it's a sensible idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there you go. And I think as long as it all gets sorted, that's the main thing. But fingers crossed it does, eh? Fingers crossed it does.
Yes, and keep your views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But now, despite U-turning on his plan to overhaul the ministerial conduct system, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is set to face some angry MPs in the House of Commons today as they hold an emergency debate over the corruption scandal engulfing the government. Labour leader Keir Starmer has called on the Prime Minister to answer, apologise and act after a succession of Tory MPs sought to excuse the Prime Minister's attempt at corrupting British politics, they said.
Yes, well, he accused the Prime Minister of creating one rule for himself and one rule for his friends and another for everyone else. He says he must apologise and the country has to take action to undo the damage he has done. Well, we can talk now to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who's in Glasgow for us. Thank you very much, Tom. You see, you've peeled yourself off the uncooperative crusties and now we're talking about something completely different. Look, how much trouble is Boris Johnson in here? Does he actually have to apologise? Are Labour being a bit over the top, or is he banging trouble?
I think the Prime Minister here has really shot himself in the foot. It's quite curious how what was a relatively middling story, something that didn't lead the front pages of any paper, maybe page 2 or page 3 of an inside paper had it gone on, this Owen Paterson scandal, suddenly became something much, much bigger because the government tried to meddle. And it's that old adage that the cover-up is always worse than the crime. This is something that has fed into a bit of a theme of this government. The Labour Party has been struggling for a while to try and pull together a cohesive argument against this government. We've heard for months and months about contracts going to friends and various things like that over COVID. And for a lot of that, the Conservative Party has been able to simply say, well, this was a pandemic. We had to scrabble together to sort of provide the tests, to provide the PPE. Of course, we asked whoever we could get our hands on, whoever we knew. Well, this brings in a slightly different angle. This is now Conservative MPs being paid very, very handsomely by outside firms, coming to the fore in terms of who gets access to government, and it doesn't sound like it's a particularly edifying moment. We often get these sort of cash for access scandals. It's not the first time that we've had them in our politics. Tony Blair's government was dragged down by them as well. But this emergency debate will really be the opposition's first time that it can properly sort of set the agenda on this issue, on an issue that the Conservative Conservative Party's been getting away with, quite frankly, for quite a while. The Tory Party's been ahead in the polls by a huge degree. Up until very recently, just this morning, we're starting to see a little bit of a change in direction in the polls. There's a question as to whether this will be a blip or whether this will be something more substantial, but certainly what has gone on in the last 4 or 5 days in Westminster politics has really turned a spotlight where the government really would rather it not be.
Thank you for bringing us that update. I'm sure we'll be going back to you throughout the day and tomorrow, of course, to tell our viewers what happened today when the Prime Minister is being quizzed, which will happen a bit later on. But for now, we're joined by Sean Worth, who's a former Downing Street advisor and former head of the Conservative Policy Unit. Thank you for joining us this morning. I believe you worked for David Cameron a long time ago, about 10 years ago. And of course, he himself was a couple of months ago embroiled in his own lobbying scandal. He was found to have poor judgment. That's what they concluded, this MP's report. What's your opinion on the line, where the line has to be drawn between genuine lobbying and what many call sleaze?
Well, I actually think that the idea that MPs can do second jobs while they're also working in Parliament is continually, it's a continuing pull. At the moment, there are a number of MPs who don't have lobbying jobs. They're lawyers, they're doctors, they're GPs, and the argument is that they should be able to do a second job because some of these are very high caliber people, and they can functionally do an MP job and do a bit of part-time work as a GP, for example, and that helps keep their arm into a profession that they need a long-term link to. Working as a consultant for a company that's perhaps helping clients get government contracts or get through the planning system, I think increasingly looks in the modern age something that will be dropped. Politics is all about emotion and perception. It's very rarely about facts. And if something looks bad, then it tends to become unsustainable, which is actually why the government has done this U-turn this week. And as Tom said in your piece there, they look terrible, they look incompetent, but ultimately they've probably done the right thing in just backing off the whole thing.
Yeah, is the way around this then to just pay MPs even more money, make it so that actually they don't need to have another job, they don't need to have another source of income?
The whole system needs to be completely
rephrase that,
revamped.
sorry, because they don't need to now. Is it that they'll be less inclined to want one, really, is what I'm getting at.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, there's a big difference between MPs who, say, work in Scotland or Cornwall, have to commute all the way in and stay in London in Parliament for 4 days and then go back. And there's an expenses system that helps pay for that. But many of them would argue it's not enough. And an MP's salary, if you say to the regular viewer, an MP earns about 70,000 quid a year, they'd say 70 grand is a fantastic amount of money. What are they doing going off and earning other money? Being an MP is actually quite a difficult job, and it is very costly for you personally to be able to get into London, stay in London. You're not allowed to go first class travel, so if you've got work to do, it's better for you to get a taxi in often. It becomes very expensive, and there is an argument that the MPs should deserve a bit more money, but the real problem with it is that you could be an MP for 50 years, you could do absolutely nothing, and you'll get paid as the same as an MP who, say, comes in and is really energetic, does tons of work, is fantastic, attends lots of committees, and they don't get any more money for that. So there's an issue about how professional the whole thing is, and whether there should be bonuses, for example, for extra work. And then you won't find MPs having to be millionaires before they come into the House, or seeking these second jobs to try and just get themselves above the line a bit further.
And we've had some viewers getting in touch this morning and saying, just scrap the lot of them. They're all sort of rotten and corrupt to the core. Earlier, the International Trade Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, said actually she doesn't think there's a need for an inquiry, and she doesn't believe there's a wider problem of corruption in Parliament. What's your view on that?
Well, as I said, if you look at the facts, most MPs are doing they have the caliber to do more than one job, as many CEOs do, for example, across the country. Some of these guys are really high caliber, and yes, they've got the ability to do a part-time job in addition to the public service that they do. But politics isn't about that. It's about perception and about emotion 90% of the time. And it just doesn't look right. And I don't think it's a sustainable position that Anne-Marie Trevelyan has put forward there. You know, you as you said, your viewers are saying scrap a lot of them. You know, it just looks terrible. So I think they should ban second jobs. And as I say, the problem is the only people you will then get into politics are people that are millionaires or are funded by trade unions, because that's the other load of funding. Remember, trade unions fund individuals and they fund MPs, officers. So all of these guys are at it. Ed Davies, the leader of Liberal Democrats, he earns about £100,000 a year on the side. You know, all parties are at it. The whole thing should just be scrapped. And if you're coming into politics for the money, then you're in the wrong job. You know, teachers don't get the chance to earn a second salary. I think the whole thing should just be scrapped. And as I said earlier, look at bonuses, look at performance-related pay. Let's just update the whole thing for the modern age.
Sensible proposal there, Sean Worth. Thank you for joining us this morning, former Downing Street advisor and former head of the Conservative Policy Unit as well. But I believe we can go to some of your views now.
Yes, we can. Well, we can indeed, yes. Within the realm of possibilities, it does not matter how much you pay them, you cannot buy and eliminate MPs' greed. It's as natural as breathing. That's from Paul. So there we are.
I mean, it speaks to what you've been talking about this morning as well, about GPs. And I think we do have to generally accept, if we're going to be realists here, that, of course, people want money, don't they? That's the sort of nature of living in a capitalist society, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with wanting to make more and more income. But it does become a fundamental problem, I suppose. There are certain professions, doctors being one of them, for example. MPs surely must be one of them, where your heart has to be in the right place. If it's seen to be that people are in it for the money, then it's corrosive. It corrupts what we understand as democracy. So I think it is important.
I can see there being scope for there being quite a few grey areas. Like, let's just say, especially rural MPs, for example, you know, you could be on a local farming board or something like that. And then when there's a national issue about, I'm just completely spitballing, you know, about the way, like, milk is processed or something, you might have a genuine view on that. You probably do have a genuine view on that, and it affects the country. But then do you have to excuse yourself from that discussion because you also, you know, that view might also coincide with someone who's paying you a salary? There's different types of lobbying, aren't there? There are people who maybe work for something like a tobacco firm who are just overtly trying to lobby the government to make sure that we can sell cigarettes to 16-year-olds. That's different, isn't it, from, you know, when someone's there who's just got a genuine view, but there's a bit of a crossover. So it's important not to kind of...
Yeah, there are grey areas, I suppose, because, for example, if you are an MP and there's a particular issue that is of massive importance to your constituency, and you know that you can use your influence to get a particular company that's a key part of that issue, that can resolve that issue, and you can influence it, then is that so bad? I don't know. That's where there are lots of grey areas. But as Sean said there, I think it is worth sort of looking again at and reforming the whole system.
Indeed. Well, there we go. After the break, anyway, new proposals for undercover police officers in nightclubs have come under attack. We'll be bringing you more on that. But first, the weather and a quick break.
Hi there. A lot of cloud for many of us through the rest of today, with outbreaks of rain into the north and the west. Drier elsewhere, with still some sunshine ahead of the main weather front, which is moving into northwestern areas. This low pressure pushing towards Iceland, so far enough away from the UK, but its trailing weather fronts are bringing some outbreaks of rain to mainly northwestern, but some western parts of the UK as well. So that's where we've got the thickening cloud, turning damp across parts of Wales into the southwest as well. The more persistent rain, therefore, northwest England, western Scotland, clearing up for Northern Ireland. Ahead of the rain, actually some sunshine there for the East Midlands into East Anglia and the southeast. A little bit milder in many places compared to Sunday, 12 to 13 or 14 Celsius. Into the evening, and strengthening winds push further outbreaks of rain into western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Trailing cloud and some small outbreaks of rain elsewhere, but generally a cloudy picture overnight, and with that breeze, it's going to be a milder night with temperatures holding up well above zero.
We're looking at 8 to 12 Celsius by and large as we start off Tuesday. But a damp start there for southern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, northwest England. The rain turns up then into parts of Wales as we head into the late morning period. But it does clear Scotland and Northern Ireland, replaced by sunny spells and scattered showers along with a blustery breeze. Ahead of the rain, again, a largely fine day across East Anglia in the southeast. Even milder once more, 15 to 16 Celsius possible, but feeling a bit cooler there for Scotland and Northern Ireland as those blustery showers arrive. And they'll continue into Tuesday evening as well as Wednesday, with a lot of cloud further south on Wednesday and further outbreaks of rain at times. The rain not particularly heavy or persistent. It's mainly just a damp day on Thursday in places in the south. Sunny for most of us on Thursday before further rain on Friday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. MPs will hold an emergency debate on parliamentary standards later today, following accusations of corruption. Well, that's as Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces calls for a public inquiry into allegations of Tory sleaze. Last week, the government made a U-turn after a vote was passed to overhaul its misconduct system, blocking the suspension of Owen Paterson for breaching lobbying rules. Police in the French city of Cannes have shot a man who attacked a group of officers with a knife. One policeman was stabbed but escaped injury, protected by his bulletproof vest. The suspect allegedly tried to attack a second officer when the third policeman opened fire. Sources say the attacker claimed to have been acting in the name of the Prophet. A British man killed in a shark attack off Western Australia has been described as a wonderful father. 57-year-old Paul Millerchip was swimming at Port Beach near Perth when the alarm was raised. During a search for his body, police only recovered a pair of goggles. UK travellers can now fly to the United States for the first time in nearly 2 years. The US has opened its borders to fully vaccinated visitors who must also take a COVID test within 3 days of arrival. Children need to be tested 3 to 5 days later. An Amy Winehouse dress has sold for more than £180,000 at auction. That's 16 times the original estimate. The halter neck was worn during her final stage performance a month before her death at age 27. You're right up to date. I'll be back at 12 o'clock with more on all of today's top stories. But now, back to Patrick and Mercy.
Good morning. Now, plainclothes police will stand outside nightclubs in a bid to reduce violence against women. The move was unveiled by the Metropolitan Police as part of a wider published plan claiming that police activity will be stepped up to prevent nighttime violence against women in London.
Yeah, so this comes amidst rising pressure on Dame Cressida Dick after previous advice issued by the Met was slammed, suggesting women who feel in danger can run into somebody's house or just flag down a bus for help. Well, Dame Cressida says the move will increase officers' skills and maximise the impact of key units to tackle the problem.
Yes, now we're joined by Peter Marks, Chief Executive of Recom UK, who are experts within the late night entertainment and bar sector and owns 46 nightclubs as well. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm not going to lie to you, this does feel a bit sinister and a bit futile for me, because what's not going to make me feel safer if I am in a nightclub is a police presence that isn't visible. So from your experience, what kinds of measures do actually make women feel safer in a nightclub setting?
Okay, yeah, thanks. We do a lot. We have a policy called We Care. I think one of the things that we need to do is perhaps communicate this better to our guests, because we're used to dealing in this space. We don't think we really need the help of police to deal with it. We have security. In fact, we spend about 7 pence in every pound that we take on security and medical staff and making sure that we look after people if they get into any sort of trouble. As well as that, we have other policies such as, well, first of all, we have female security, so that if anybody who is a woman who feels that they'd like to approach someone, they find it much easier to approach a female member of security than a male one. So we make sure that we have that sorted. And of course, we have other things like we keep an eye on people as they leave. If they look like they are not with the person they may have come in with, or it just looks a bit strange, we'll pull them to a side and just check that indeed they are okay. And likewise, if any single woman leaves the club, we also check on them and make sure that they're safe. And if people get into trouble because they've had too much to drink or whatever, then we make sure that we give them some water, we sit them down and look after them, and then if necessary, we put them in a taxi. And these are the things that it's the right thing to do in the late night economy. People are sort of learning their limits, and sometimes they go over them. I've been in this business 40 years now, and looking after your guests is just part of what we do. And having more a police, but invisible, I don't think that's smart, if I'm honest.
Well, yes, no, I agree, really. I mean, I think surely a visible thing would make women feel safer. I mean, that would sort of seem an obvious thing for me. But just to get involved with something else slightly for a quick second here, how far would you be willing to go with this? Because one could imagine a situation where it's all right for you to maybe have some undercover officers outside your nightclub. But if I knew that if I came to one of your nightclubs, there were undercover officers inside the nightclub as well, I suspect that less people, would be inclined to go to your nightclub. So how far are you willing to go in the interest of women's safety?
Well, let's pick up on undercover people. I can imagine that actually being a bit of a problem. What if people who were our normal guests, our normal customers, claiming to be undercover policemen? That could lead to all sorts of issues, couldn't it? So I think We've got the balance right as it is. And I think really what we need to do is get the communication right so that people can see the measures that we take and that actually nightclubs are a safe place to be because of all the measures that we do have. And you don't get that in the pubs and the other sort of going out spaces. And as I said, this is because we know what we're doing. We've been doing it for decades now, and I think we've got industry-leading protections for women. I think we need to tell people a little bit more about it. We've got these policies in the background. We need to be putting them in the foreground and using our social media platforms to communicate this.
But to flip that on its head, don't you think that's sort of why the police feel they have had to take what some might say are drastic measures? Because, as you say, you've had all these measures for a long time, these industry-wide measures, and clearly the police think it's not working, it's still not enough, hence why they're feeling the need to intervene in this way.
I think the police have a tough job on their hands, and they're trying to keep everybody happy, and they're trying to make sure that people feel safe. And I think they've come under a lot of criticism over the last few weeks, in particular with the spiking reportage. And I think they just want to be able to sort of be seen to be doing something. But I have to say that undercover policeman isn't something that I really think solves anything, and indeed it might actually open up a bit of a can of worms with people who may claim to be undercover policemen but aren't. Frankly, we like to see police on the streets visibly and outside. That's the right thing. We pay for our own security, and we can look after those when they're inside.
Thank you very much for joining us. Peter Marks there, Chief Executive of Recom UK. They're experts in the nighttime economy and bar sector. They own 46 nightclubs. It's worth noting, actually, that I spoke last night to a guy called Norman Brennan, who's been in the police for 31 years. He's now out of it. He runs security advice, etc. And he said, this can't happen. So I have a feeling, and I hope I'm wrong about this, that we're going to be told about a load of undercover police officers standing outside nightclubs, but actually they won't be, and we won't be able to tell because by definition they're undercover. He said the police simply don't have the resources for this. They simply don't have the manpower for it at all, and he just doesn't feel like it's actually going to happen. There is also the other side of it, isn't there, as you touched on, Mercy, which is, if you are a woman coming out of a nightclub, presumably a visible police presence would be actually make you feel safer than, someone allegedly standing there in jeans and a T-shirt.
Yeah, it just all does feel a bit counterintuitive, because if the point is to make women feel safer and so that if something is going on, police will be in the vicinity, then what surely you need is a police woman or policeman who is visible, who I can identify, and so if something is going wrong, I can quickly identify a police woman or man and go to them and report the problem. So there's that aspect of it, and there's the other aspect of, obviously this is all the catalyst for all of this has been what happened to Sarah Everard, and there was obviously Wayne Couzens, and he was in plain clothes, but he gave her his badge. And I just think if the solution to the problem, police in plain clothes or people claiming to be the police is a problem now because of what happened to Sarah Everard. So if a man is approaching me who's in plain clothes and saying, oh, actually, trust me on this one, I am the police, excuse me if I'm a bit sceptical as to the validity of that. So it just all seems a bit counterintuitive to me.
Absolutely, and supposedly Cressida Dick's new policy is that if you are an undercover police officer and you do stop someone, you've got to then call back into base to prove that you're an undercover copper. Well, so this entire process now relies on us diverting police resources to standing outside nightclubs, the fact that actually we might not have the resources to do that, the idea now that if someone, let's say like Mercy, gets into trouble outside a nightclub and they don't know who to shout at, they're relying on an individual to actually see that and intervene, and then they have to prove who they are. Well, it's not a great system, is it?
Yeah, I mean, we do laugh. It's a serious issue, but it just shows how ridiculous it is that it's laughable, in my opinion. But let us know what you think. GBVs at gbnews.uk.
Yes, well, there we go. A lot of you have indeed been getting in touch with Barry saying, what idiot thought of this idea? And there we go. Well, couldn't possibly name them. Yeah. After the break, we will be looking at accusations of British universities accepting donations of tainted money. Find out what we mean very shortly.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Morning, everyone. Now, an Oxford professor has come out to suggest that state reform of universities may be necessary, as he claimed that they had lost their moral compass by accepting donations from a trust set up by the late Max Mosley. It's been reported that Oxford, amongst other universities, have accepted substantial sums of money from a trust set up in the name of Mosley's son, who died in 2009 of a suspected drug overdose.
Yes, the controversy lies in Mosley's past, as his father, Oswald Mosley, the leader and founder of the British Union of Fascists, a party notorious for its support of Hitler and for its anti-Semitic propaganda. Critics are arguing that the money is tainted, therefore. Well, we're joined live in the studio by Jake Wallace-Simmons, who's the deputy editor of the Jewish Chronicle and alumnus of St Peter's College, Oxford. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Do you think money is tainted when it comes, you know, it originated in some way or other from somebody who did have very problematic views?
Well, I think in a way that question is a bit of a sideline, because at the moment we live in a climate, certainly at universities, where the origin of money and the origin of donations and the identities of people who appear on walls and in you know, busts and statues is winding everybody up.
I'm very sorry to interrupt about this. Yeah. Apparently, we're going to have to double mic you because there's an issue. So I'm going to do seamlessly now in a way that the public will never know about. I'm going to talk about this issue for about the next 20 seconds until we sort you out. Then it's good that this will never be brought to the public's attention.
Great.
There's no way.
We're not doing live television.
No, absolutely. It's a good job we're not live. God, can you imagine if we were live? How embarrassing this would be for us all now, and we'd have to maybe ask him the same question all over again. And God, we couldn't have that. But anyway, so there we go.
So we're talking about when money originates in some way or other from people with problematic views. This is obviously something that's been going on for quite a while, not least because of people's links with colonialism and slavery. Yes. Oxford has been at the centre of that as well. But
back we go. Yes. So, seamlessly done. Carry on. So there's this money tainted.
One mic wasn't enough.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I say, whether or not money is tainted or not is another question, because the university world as a whole has decided very much that it is, because we're talking about a world in which commissions and inquiries are set up to investigate any possible links to the slave trade, for example, amongst donors and icons in universities. We're talking about a world in which people seriously discuss toppling statues or removing busts or taking down stained glass windows. And this is a world that somehow has looked the other way, while money that comes from an openly fascist source, this is fascist cash that has come in, has somehow made it under the radar for years and years and years, including my college, St. Peter's, my old college, that took millions and millions of pounds from a fascist source while looking the other way. And, you know, my college in particular, I feel quite cross about, because in February they invited Ken Loach, who's been very controversial figure in terms of anti-Semitism as well, and that created a furore. So there's some sort of history there of being very sensitive towards the needs of certain minorities, but not towards Jews.
Yes, there's a lot going on there with that, isn't there? And I just wonder, is there, I suppose, any implication whatsoever this money is being used to further a fascist cause? Is it just the fact that the money belongs to fascists, I suppose?
It's just that it came from fascist sources. It's not. There's no idea that the money at the moment is in any way, or that the fact the charity is in any way, you know, pushing fascist ideas. But look, I mean, to put this in context, I mean, the Labour Party, not known for its particularly sensitive nature when it comes to certain parts of the world, certain parts of society, rather. Rejected Max Mosley's money in 2018 when it came out that he'd published a leaflet accusing ethnic minorities of spreading disease in the 60s. And so even the Labour Party were sensitive enough to turn down this money, and yet somehow the universities weren't.
Do you think there is an argument, however, that when certain things like this are identified, as you mentioned, that there is a drive in the moment in society for universities to identify money, buildings, whatever it is, that originates from people with problematic views. But is there not an argument for actually then using this money to actually combat perhaps anti-Semitism, other forms of discrimination, and actually changing it to do some good in the world, and therefore you should actually keep the money and redivert the sources to tackle problems?
Well, I mean, that's absolutely it's a very, very strong argument that you could make. I mean, you could say, look, let's take Max Mosley's money or Oswald Mosley's money or whatever it is and use it to undermine fascism. I mean, in actual fact, some of the money has been used to look at press freedom and to set up particular research into the Leveson inquiry and archiving that. And we know that Max Mosley in particular had a bit of a flexible relationship with the press, shall we say. So it isn't always used in that way, but you could make that argument. But the thing is, then you'd need to make the same argument with regard to money that's come from the slave trade. You know, let's use it in a way that spreads democracy or whatever. And that argument isn't being made anywhere, so why should it be made in this case alone?
I don't know whether or not this is something that you were alluding to before, but you know, there are obviously big pushes at the moment in society for things like the roads must fall statue and all of this stuff. Is there a sense, in your opinion, that maybe we're more desensitised to racism against Jewish people than we are against potentially other groups? Do you think that maybe it's almost seen, dare I say it, as more okay to be racist towards that community as it is to other communities?
Yeah.
Right, fair enough. Okay, but why? Go on, expand on that.
Well, I mean, you know, we've seen it throughout the Labour Party scandal in the past few years. People seem to be sort of more accepting of racism against Jews somehow than racism against other minorities. And there's a complicated reason behind that. I think part of it is anti-Semitism itself, that the nature of it is that people begin to see Jews as mysteriously powerful, which obviously we're not. But once the anti-Semitic mindset begins to see Jews in that way, then it begins to feel like a case of, well, why should we be worried about what they think? You know, we're trying to, you know, that's only punching up, you know. And so I think that part of the nature of anti-Semitism means that you take it less seriously than other forms of racism.
Fantastic stuff.
Well, thank you so much for joining us in the studio. Jake Wallace-Simmons there, the Deputy Editor of the Jewish Chronicle and alumnus of St. Peter's College in Oxford.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff, that, actually, I think. It's interesting to get kind of stuck right into it, so thank you very much for coming in. Now, half of Ofsted's outstanding rated schools are set to be stripped of that grade following an overhaul of the inspection regime. So the Watchdog's head says, Amanda Stapleman, actually, the Chief Inspector of Education at Ofsted, says she wouldn't be surprised if the number halves by the time the Watchdog has finished their inspection.
Yes, this would see the number of outstanding schools fall from 4,133 to roughly 2,000, and this comes after new inspection measures were introduced which will overhaul education standards. Well, let's talk to Chris McGovern, the chairman of the Campaign for Real Education Now. Good morning, Chris. Thanks for joining us. What do you make of this? I mean, if it increases standards, that's surely a good thing.
Look, let me first of all say I am an Ofsted inspector, or at least I carry the card. I don't practice anymore. So that's where I'm coming from. I think that the Chief Inspector is right. Too many schools are graded as outstanding. 1 in 5 scores outstanding. In fact, 4 in 5 are either outstanding or good. But if you look at our performance internationally, we're well down in the second division, about 3 years behind. So it's a nonsense to suggest all our schools are outstanding. But the head of the government's watchdog for standards a few years ago told the Sunday Times, and I quote, "All our kids are brilliant." And a couple of weeks ago, the new Education Secretary, Mr. Zahawi, told the party faithful in the Tory conference that our children are extraordinary, our teachers are incredible. So in a sense, you could say, yeah, actually, there are lots and lots of outstanding schools, but reality doesn't match up to that. Reality shows us that, in fact, internationally, we can see that actually our schools aren't so outstanding at all. And even the better schools aren't anywhere near the standard you get in parts of the Asia Pacific. I mean, for example, if you take the children of street cleaners and manual workers in Shanghai, according to international comparisons, they are ahead in mathematics of our very best independent schools like Westminster, Eton and so forth on average. So we're deluding ourselves. It's a fall paradise. So yeah, 3 cheers for the Chief Inspector for saying actually we're going to look at this quite closely and actually are all our schools as outstanding as we've gauged them to be in the past. So yeah, it's probably a move in the right direction. A bit of reality is always a good thing, I think, in education. We don't get much of it.
Yes, and figures reveal that 200 pupils will actually leave primary school this year without being able to read. That was according to unpublished government figures, and that had risen by 30,000 across the pandemic. So in light of this new sort of context that we find ourselves in which things have gone backwards, what do you think the criteria should now be for judging whether schools are helping children catch up, and not only catch up, but actually excel?
You're right. I mean, schools have gone backwards, but they were backwards before we started, so they've gone backwards from backwards. What can we do? Well, we mustn't give in to the teacher unions over testing. We have to test children. And, I've worked in the state sector, I've worked in the private sector. In the private sector, testing takes place every day, almost certainly every week. In the state sector, it takes place every perhaps 2 or 3 years, if that. So we have to test children, just as we go to the doctors or the dentist to do a checkup. We need to test children to see what their standards are, and we need to do it from about the age of 7, which is what we call key stage 1. So we need to know early if children are falling behind. We have a crisis in educational standards, and our economy depends on a well-educated workforce. We can't simply rely on immigrants, but we do rely quite a lot on immigrants. We can't just rely on immigrants. We've got to educate people, and we're falling further and further behind. But, I've said it before, one of the problems is that a lot of children who are failing and who failed during the pandemic lockdown failed because their own parents can't read and write very well. I work with those families, and I find that the parents want to help their children. These are kids in poor conditions. They want to help their children. They're not going to come on GBNews and tell you that they're illiterate because they're ashamed of it. But the government needs to wake up. Parents need to help their children more, and they can't if they themselves have been through our education system and are innumerate and illiterate or semi-illiterate. So we've got a crisis. We need to face up to it. And look, I don't welcome failure. There will be more schools not reach the top standard when this new report comes out. But look, we've got to face up to reality. That's the only way we can make our way in the world. And too many children are leaving school and they're let down. And we work with young offenders in prisons. And what we find, most of young offenders are illiterate and innumerate. They're unemployable. They walk the green mile. No qualifications, no job. That's where we are.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry to sound so gloomy.
No, not at all. I could listen to you all day. I'm very sorry. It's just we've got to squeeze another feature in before the end of the show, Chris. So thank you very much, Chris McGovern there, the chairman of the campaign for real education, imparting his sage wisdom onto us yet again. Thank you very much. Now, travel firm Expedia has stopped selling holidays which promote or include live performances by captive dolphins and whales. The decision comes after widespread criticism of the tourism practice and advocacy on animal welfare by political figures.
Yes, well, we're now joined by Dr. Mark Jones, who's head of policy at the Born Free Foundation, which is an animal charity that works to stop the exploitation and suffering of animals living in captivity and the wild. Thanks for joining us this morning. I watched a film a couple of years ago about Tilikum the whale. Can't remember what it was called.
Blackfish,
but Blackfish. And I was absolutely appalled. And it was from that moment on where I thought it's quite inhumane to keep whales and dolphins in captivity. So I welcome that. But is what you campaign for actually all animals in captivity, including in zoos, being allowed to be free, and for the banning of that as well?
Well, yes, good morning, and thanks for having me on the show this morning. Born Free's been campaigning since its inception back in the early 1980s for an end to the exploitation of animals in captivity. I think dolphinaria, at which people watch captive dolphins and other marine mammals perform tricks or perhaps are invited to interact with them, are among some of the cruelest of captive animal attractions. I mean, these animals are some of the most highly intelligent, highly social creatures on Earth. They typically move across massive areas of ocean in their natural environment while communicating with each other through highly developed language using sonar. And these kind of complex physical, psychological and social needs that these animals have, which we're only just really beginning to understand, simply can't be met in captivity. So this announcement coming from one of the travel industry's major players is very welcome indeed.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, do you think this maybe is a turning point now for people? Do you think actually, because look, I was one of my biggest regrets, but I was a child at the time, so you know, people have to let me off really. I went to SeaWorld and I enjoyed it, and you know, I was lucky enough, or unlucky enough, depending on which way you look at it, to do like the old little swimming with captive dolphins in Florida, that kind of thing, that very fake element of it. And at the time, no one batted an eyelid. It was like, this is just lovely, what a great day out it is. But actually now, there's no way I'd do that again. And I think attitudes are changing, aren't they?
I think they are, and obviously at Born Free, we put a lot of time and effort into trying to explain to people why we're trying to bring an end to these kind of this kind of captive exploitation of animals. Why it is that that as we learn more and more about these animals, we're coming to realise that we can't meet their needs in captivity, and why it's entirely inappropriate to be using these animals for the purpose of public entertainment. And an increasing number of countries have ended or are in the process of phasing out dolphinaria. However, many still exist, and in some countries like China, for example, the dolphinaria industry is expanding. We think around 3,000 dolphins are believed to be incarcerated in these facilities around the world, including still some 300 across 30-odd facilities in 14 EU countries. And British and other tourists still visit many of these facilities each year. So the move that Expedia has made is really important, because we need people to understand, we need to reduce demand for these kind of attractions, but we need to go further. We need other industry players to come on board, and we need our government to step in and say, we're not going to allow industry players to advertise these activities.
We do have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us this morning, Dr. Mark Jones, the head of policy at the Born Free Foundation. And actually, what's on top of my bucket list is seeing whales in the wild.
In the wild, that's the point, though. In the wild.
That's what we're supposed to do. But yes, we have to leave it there for now. So we'll be back tomorrow, but don't go away. Up next is the briefing with Gloria De Piero after the weather.
Hi there. A lot of cloud for many of us through the rest of today, with outbreaks of rain into the north and the west. Drier elsewhere, with still some sunshine ahead of the main weather front, which is moving into northwestern areas. This low pressure pushing towards Iceland, so far enough away from the UK, but its trailing weather fronts are bringing some outbreaks of rain to mainly northwestern, but some western parts of the UK as well. So that's where we've got the thickening cloud, turning damp across parts of Wales into the southwest as well. The more persistent rain, therefore, northwest England, western Scotland, clearing up for Northern Ireland. Ahead of the rain, actually some sunshine there for the East Midlands into East Anglia and the southeast. A little bit milder in many places compared to Sunday, 12 to 13 or 14 Celsius. Into the evening, and strengthening winds push further outbreaks of rain into the western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Trailing cloud and some small outbreaks of rain elsewhere, but generally a cloudy picture overnight, and with that breeze, it's going to be a milder night with temperatures holding up well above zero. We're looking at 8 to 12 Celsius by and large as we start on Tuesday. But a damp start there for southern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, northwest England. The rain turns up then into parts of Wales as we head into the late morning period. But it does clear Scotland and Northern Ireland, replaced by sunny spells and scattered showers along with a blustery breeze. Ahead of the rain, again, a largely fine day across East Anglia and the southeast. Even milder once more, 15 to 16 Celsius possible, but feeling a bit cooler there for Scotland and Northern Ireland as those blustery showers arrive. And they'll continue into Tuesday evening as well as Wednesday, with a lot of cloud further south on Wednesday and further outbreaks of rain at times. The rain not particularly heavy or persistent. It's mainly just a damp day on Thursday in places in the south. Sunny for most of us on Thursday before further rain on Friday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.